make the trek out to Burning Man for a weekend a day. After a lot of work, oh, there's a lot of play. Party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Year after year, they come back to scratch that itch. They all say their lives have been changed. After many years, lives have been rearranged. That change is what this show is all about. You'll see the impact of Burning Man up and out. So sit back, relax, and cancel all your plans. These are the stories about the shadow of the man.
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of The Shadow of the Man. I am your host, Andy. Wait, what? That Andy? That's right. Today's episode is all about, well, me. Being the host of this show, it's probably a good idea for you to get a sense of who I am. Now, this show will be the exception to the rule. And that rule is, this show is not about me. If you want to hear my opinions on a regular basis, I would have called this The Andy Show. Now, to start off with this, there's this, my playa name, or lack thereof, That Andi. In the 28 years since I first went to Burning Man, I first went in 1996, no one has ever given me a playa name. I never really picked one for myself. I figured, you have to, earn it. So something kind of kept happening, over the years. I'd be hanging around with people and be talking, and they'd be like, who are you? Like, what? It's like, oh, Andy. Like, who? What? It was like, Andy from Hawaii. I've done this, I've done that. And they're like, oh, that Andy. Or, oh, that Andy? Like, oh. Anyway, that's basically how I got my playa name. But let's see, where should we start? I guess we'll all start in the beginning, right? I was born in 1971, a long time ago, in suburban northern New Jersey. I'm the baby, the youngest of 4 kids. My mother was born in South Africa. She came to the United States by herself as a teenager. She's of mixed race. Let's see. I think she's part of, what is it called? The L0D1B haplogroup. Basically, that means just her maternal lineage going back, mitochondrial DNA, since time immemorial, belongs to this. It's a pretty rare subtype group that basically most of the people who are of this lineage all live in South Africa. Nelson Mandela is actually a member of this group. My dad was born in the United States to Italian immigrants. They came through Ellis Island, I think in the 20s or something. My dad was a film professor. He loved Alfred Hitchcock. Every Friday we would have a movie night. He would break out the old 16 millimeter projector and bring home different Alfred Hitchcock movies. I mean, I grew up in this old Victorian house that wasn't really up to modern electrical codes, didn't really have light switches. You had to walk into the middle of the room and pull a chain to turn the light on. So yeah, I managed to watch Psycho and The Birds and Dial M for Murder and all those probably at least a dozen times by the time I was 10 years old. Yeah, that was good times. So yeah, I did a 23andMe a couple years ago. Found out that I'm actually 10.5% sub-Saharan African, 14% Central and South Asian, 1% East Asian, and the rest is about 73.4% Pan-European. Irish and Dutch, but mostly Italian. I identify as a man, and my pronouns are he and him. So yeah, grew up in 1971. I spent the 70s to mid 80s going to public school in New Jersey, and then went off to private school in Manhattan during the 1980s. Jesuit high school. I spent my summers cutting grass and falls raking leaves to make $20 for like 6 hours of work. It's enough to like, buy candy and go to the hobby store, make little plastic models, and occasionally would get in the old VW Beetle, and drive off to Action Park. If you guys ever saw that documentary, yeah, I would go to Action Park and come home with a perhaps mild concussion. So yeah, in the 80s, I went to a Jesuit high school in New York City. I had to take 2 trains, walk through Times Square, and a long bus ride home. I didn't really realize this until decades later that I think it was like 1985 to 1989, New York City was like the highest crime period in New York's history. So that walk through Times Square, yeah, we had a uniform you had to wear. It was like a blue blazer with the school crest on on the breast pocket, and it had a button-down shirt and a tie, and walking through Times Square with all the peep shows and rated X theaters and people walking by offering to buy you drugs, or sell you drugs, for a 15, 16-year-old kid. That was this quite formative. But I eventually graduated from high school, realized my dream of leaving suburban New Jersey. I moved up to Vermont. I went to University of Vermont, Burlington, Vermont. Beautiful, beautiful place. Wonderful people. I studied biochemistry. Yeah, I originally had the idea I was going to be a doctor, but after like my first semester, I realized I'm not going to med school. This is kind of crazy. So yeah, I studied biochemistry. My junior year, I went to Florence, Italy. I studied art history, traveled all over Europe. Yeah, I kind of took a break from the biochemistry, and then did like sculpture and painting and art history and like all manner of art studies. So it was a very formative, very exciting, very fun year. Then I came back to the United States. I remember the day I landed was like April of 1992, and on the news it was like LA is burning down, riots. I've been out of the country for a year, and with the very limited back then, there was no internet. Maybe I would get like this limited English language newspaper like once a week, every 2 weeks or something. But I came back and was like, who's this Bill Clinton guy? And it's like, why is LA burning to the ground? Like, what's going on? But finished up college, and I met then was my girlfriend Nicole, who 8 years later would become my wife, and we're still married together today. And after I graduated, I did a 1-year course in what's called cytology, which is the career I do to this day. I work in a pathology department. And basically the job entails looking for cancer. Yep. So yeah, we moved from Vermont. We wanted to get out of the cold because the both of us lived in New England, and we're like, oh, we want to go somewhere warm. Like, where should we go? We're like, the South, like Florida, like the Gulf Coast, no. Midwest, no. Northwest, and they're like, At the time, like the number, Burlington, Vermont was the number 2 most rainiest place in the country. Number 1 was Seattle, and I think Portland was kind of close behind that. So we're like, how about West Coast somewhere? From everything we knew or heard of, people that like heard about LA, we're like, I don't know, sounds kind of crazy. So settled on good old San Francisco. My brother Dan moved there about a year before we did, because we moved there in 1994. He moved there in 1993. And so we actually stayed with him for the first few weeks while we were getting an apartment. And by that time, like, me and my brother Dan hadn't really spent like very much time together. Like, I mean, we grew up together as kids, like in New Jersey, but like, as I said, like, I'm the youngest of 4, and we're all like 2 years apart, and he's about 4 years older than me. So like, he went off to college, and then came back from college and then like left again, and then I was in high school and then I was in college, so we didn't really sync up for a number of years, and so we kind of reconnected at a point when I think I was 22 and he was 26. So yeah, we proceeded to make up for lost time. We had a really great time. We met a lot of friends, and we're both new to San Francisco, right? But we made a lot of friends in the underground like arts community, just like an underground community, and so that's where we first heard of Burning Man, and so we had some friends who went, and I think in the summer of 1996, like Dan and I were hanging out, and we're like, we've never done. It's like we've never taken like a road trip together. Like let's go do something fun. And our friend Sharon was like, "Oh, you guys should go to Burning Man." Yeah, that was the person who originally got us to go to Burning Man. Was a black British woman, a friend of ours named Sharon Virtue. Her and her boyfriend Amin, they were like, "Oh yeah, come with us, come camp with us." And so, yeah, she just had one stipulation. She's like, "Can you bring Amin up in your car?" I was like, "Oh sure." So this was 1996. I believe we went up on Saturday. They burned the man on Sunday. We came back Monday, right? So my brother had a hatchback like VW GTI, and we stuffed the three of us in that car. Amin, I'm not sure if he still is or he was like a DJ. Not sure his DJ name is or was, but yeah, we all like stuffed in the car, and we didn't even have regular coolers. We just had like styrofoam coolers, and we like stopped in Reno, and like we picked up like a bunch of wood. I mean, we did get a survival guide, but it was this 11 by 17 or what 8.5 by 17, whatever it is, like photocopy. It was like a number of pages just like stapled together, and I think we basically read the part about like just like the directions and how to get there, because the whole time we were like driving out, we're just like, so what exactly are we headed towards? And we're just like, I don't know. At the time I thought it was like, well, there's like a bunch of people like doing crazy things, like RVs and stuff. So I was like, you mean like those old people who like travel around the country, like they get together in like in RVs? And I was like, or maybe it's some sort of like biker kind of gang thing. Like it's like old people in RVs and bikers. Like this is strange. Okay, so we get up to Gerlach with our few rudimentary signs. We get off the blacktop, and there's this cars pulling in. This is like Saturday. What time was it? Probably like early afternoon or something. And we thought there's gonna be some sort of gate or something. It's like, yeah, there's a couple of people, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, you got your compass, right?" And we're like, compass. Like, oh shoot, that was part of the instructions we didn't read. And they're like, yeah, I just pointed in this direction, and they go like put your speedometer and like go for this many miles, and you can't miss it. And we're like, all right. And so then we just like start taking off, and everybody, there's like a number of cars, and everyone just put pedal to the metal and just like speeding off, and it was just this plume of dust. Couldn't see anything. Right? So my brother was like, I'm just gonna go a little like outside of the line of the cars. Like we'll just kind of follow the line of cars, but like it's so dusty and dirty, like we're just gonna go outside of it to, but we'll find it, don't worry. Right? So I guess we weren't the only ones who had the same idea. So all the cars were just kind of peeling off in different directions. It was just dusty everywhere. So by the time we get out and we see daylight, there's just like dust all over the place. And so we just start heading in a random direction, and we're just driving. He's like, I want to get far enough away from the dust. And we're like, okay. So we proceed to get lost in the playa. We don't know where it is. At a certain point, you see the heat mirage, 360 degrees. All you can really see are just like the mountains. We heard, I mean, one of the things that we didn't skip in the information was just that, like, oh yeah, if the playa starts to turn dark, that means it's wet and you can get like stuck in the mud, and you'll die out there and everything. And we're like, huh. And so we're driving along, and you could hear like the playa like kind of sticking to the tires and starting to kick up, and we're like, what's that? And the playa's getting darker, and all of a sudden you start seeing these like little like trees sticking up out of the playa. We're like, I don't think it's supposed to be anything like living here. And so, I mean, like, I thought we were just gonna like just run into some swamp and then just die there, like the tar pits of La Brea or something. But we eventually got out, and then we're driving, and then we see it on the horizon, out of the heat mirage. We're like, oh yeah, there it is. And we're like, brother puts the pedal to the metal, or it's going like 90, 100, 110 miles an hour, and like, yeah, it's coming up. And we're like, huh, that's a really large city. And like, wait a minute, well, that's coming up like awfully fast. And all of a sudden it was like, whoa, slow, slam on the brakes. And we like slammed on the brakes, and then we proceeded to go bouncing over what we would later discover to be two ruts, probably from like a monster truck that like was out there when it was like really muddy, but now it was dried. So we go badoom badoom. I think the windshield like gets this huge crack. We fly around, all the wood in the car, it's all like crazy. So we stop, get out, everything's fine, and then we tool around for a little more, and then we finally find the city, drive in, find I'm in Sharon's camp. And then, we proceed to pitch our little tent, and then we have a tarp going off the side of the GTI. We dig, again, we didn't read the survival guide. Don't tell anybody, but, we do it like we always do when you go camping. Like, what do you do? Like, oh, we have a pile of wood, right? So let's dig a hole. Let's make a fire pit. Yeah, like let's make a fire pit in the playa, right? And so, we hang out. This is Saturday night. I think we're like, oh, we're gonna go to bed. And then Amin, like, scratches, knocks on our tent, and it's like, oh, hey, you should come on out to the rave camp. I'm like, DJing out there, and you can get some ecstasy out there, whatever. Like, oh, yeah. So, we get up and start the drive, and it's just like, points in a direction, it's lights or whatever, and it's like, yeah, it's like, like up the half mile, like that way. We're like, okay. And, I had to go to the bathroom, but I was like, yeah, don't worry, it's porta potties out there. I'm like, oh, awesome. I was like, should we bring water? It's like, we'll get water out there, yeah. So, we're going, and he's like, oh, don't forget to bring a flashlight. There's people driving around all over the place, and, oh, yeah, they were. And, we'd hear cars coming. I mean, we'd turn your flashlight on, like, wave them off. Yeah. We eventually get out there, have a good time. Of course, there's no porta potty. Of course, there's no water. Of course, there is the ecstasy. Walking back, we see the sunrise. I mean, it wasn't exactly the most pleasant experience in the world. I think that's where my hatred of the sunrise kind of began. I mean, in later years, seeing the sunrise was more of a sign of defeat that yet again I had stayed up all night, and now since I just have like a sweltering tent, it's like I'm gonna get no sleep during the day. But anyway, we come back and get some water, go to the porta potty, and we're like, wow, what happened last night? A lot of things burned. And then, it's a Sunday, right? So Sunday night, they're like, oh, they burned the man. Yeah, and it's just, this time, we made sure we had plenty of water and go to the porta potty. And, we're walking out, and there's like a bunch of throngs of crowds coming, going to see the man burn. He's on like a pyramid of bales of hay. And, there's just these crazy like local dudes in a lifted truck and just like just driving, like just going through the crowds of people yelling, screaming, hey, what are you doing? Stop it. And then I just see them, it just kind of go, and then just stepping on the gas, and then vroom right into some tent, just drives right over a tent. I believe that those were some of the first deaths at Burning Man. So, yeah, certainly not the last. And then, next morning, Monday, Labor Day, we packed up and head back. And, of course, we were like, wow, what a crazy experience. It's like, in certain respects, it's like, oh, we almost could have died. And this, instance, and that instance, we're like, this is awesome. We got to do it again. So, 1997, yeah. That year, I guess, it was on the Wallapai Playa. And that was the first year of our theme camp. We came up with, we spent, and this time we actually read the survival guide. Okay. Like, and we prepared, and we made a theme camp. I don't think we like registered it or anything, but we came up with what was entirely appropriate for us, we thought, which was the Cult of Distraction. Yeah, it has a really awesome logo. It looks like a fish. People think it's like the Jesus fish, but it's like, no, actually, it's the Cult of Distraction. So yeah, there's just me and Dan, and we got like a 12-foot box truck, and we got this like 5,000 watt generator. You know, it's like on wheels, and we basically use it to power like 2 or 3 light bulbs. I mean, we didn't quite understand electronics, you know, that well, like in the beginning. But, you know, we quickly made some new friends who later became like core members of our camp and our group for the next couple of years. Yeah, there's a million stories from that year. I'm sure as time goes by and you talk to other people, I'll probably bring up like anecdotes. Yeah, there's Bianca Smut Shack, Temple of Atonement, remember, Aesthetic Meat Foundation. I guess there were a bunch of vegans or vegetarians or something that brought like a whole bunch of animal carcasses and meat, and they just spread like blood like all over the playa. And yeah, they were kind of some freaky dudes. And then some friends of ours, or some people we just met, they just drove across country, and they stopped in Utah or wherever, and they're like, we have like 2 trash bags full of fireworks. And we're like, oh, yeah, awesome, let's go. So of course, we go out on the playa, around sunset, and it's like, bunches of people going out there like shooting off fireworks and shooting off mortars and these large packs. So like one of the times we were like, okay, we're gonna set up 2 mortars and one of these like large packs. And so there's 3 of us, right? And so we set it all up, and we were like, okay, 1, 2, 3, we light it, and like, hey, we back off. And my friend Brad, who lit the pack thing in the middle, like he wasn't backing off far enough. Like, come on, man, what are you doing? quit messing around. Like, come back. And he was just like, we were like running backwards, and the fuse is going down. He was like, I think I put it upside down. And he starts like walking back towards it. We're like, what? No. And so we both had to like grab him and pull and drag him back. The 2 mortars go off. Boom, boom. Kaboom, kaboom. We're like, ah. You could hear like the whole city. People like, ah. And then the pack starts going. Now the pack is basically this maybe 12-inch diameter octagonal pack that has like a whole bunch of little tubes in it. So it's like an entire fireworks show in like one box, right? So it's upside down. So we have fireworks just shooting off across the playa. 360 degrees is coming at us. It's going other places, just going on like a random. The city just kind of goes crazy, and we're just like, and we could hear the sirens and stuff coming. So like, we take off, leave our moop there on the playa. Where later we would understand to become moop, Yeah, so that was like 1997. 98 came back with COD again. Had this year we had like about 10 campers or so, and we camped next to our friends. This place called Space Station Zebra. Now remember I told you my friends Sharon and Almond, like they were the friends that they camped with. They were the guys that later on became Space Station Zebra. And I remember they made these really tall, somewhat like fake palm trees, but they had these, I'm not sure what they were called, but it was almost like dandelions, like these fluffy like seed pod things, I guess that were part of it, and it got just everywhere. Oh man, I don't have the same rules they have today that they had back then. And I guess the worst incident from that year was back then, like people didn't want to like bring stuff back from the playa, so like, you know what? I don't feel like packing all this stuff up in my car or my truck. I'm just gonna make a big pile and just burn it. So I know the space station zebra guys like went out. I think it was like just barely past the Esplanade, just out on the playa, just on the playa, and just carried a bunch of stuff. And then like one or two members of our camp was just like, yeah, those guys are burning stuff. Let's throw some stuff on the pyre so you don't have to carry it back. And I don't think I was around or something. Like I only came back later when there was just this like, I don't know. At least this one member of our camp just kept coming back and like and grabbing things and going, and he's like, "Where's the gas? I need more gas." Like, what are you doing? And then later on, my other friend in our camp, John, was like, "Where's the coffee table?" And he's like, "I burned it. It's on the pile." And he's like, "But that's my coffee table." And he's like, "Yeah, I burned it. Now we don't have to carry it back." And he's like, "No, you don't understand. That's the coffee table from my apartment." Like, so yeah. And apparently, I guess Rangers, fire, police, whatever, they came around like multiple times and put it out, and then you know they poured more gas on it and lit it again, and I guess that happened again and again and again. Because apparently, it's one of the worst trash incidents of that year. Again, one of those things I only found out about like later when I was just like, what the hell are you doing? Yeah, went back in 1999. COD came back again. We had about 12 campers. We did a little bit more reading of the survival guide. I think we were like, finally like on point that year and like left no trace. Finally. That was 1999, right? So year 2000, that was the first year I skipped because me and Nicole got married. Yeah, and so I finally figured it's like after, was it 7, 8, 9, 4 years? It's like, okay, I can take a year off of going to Burning Man, right? And then in 2001, the .com bubble was bursting. A lot of our friends were like leaving San Francisco. And, Nicole had been living in San Francisco almost 7 years, and we decided, it's like, well, we want to move on. And we were thinking about moving back to Vermont, but we was like, we came out to San Francisco for like the warmth and we wanted to come for like the beach, like it's like Baywatch, it's just like sunny and beautiful and warm every day. And, we go to San Francisco. You go to the beach and like you put your feet in the water and you're like, it's so goddamn cold. This is not like Baywatch at all. If they're watching some sort of different bay that's colder, smelly or something. So yeah, we had a bunch of friends who were moving to Hawaii, and I kept seeing this ad for this job in Hawaii, and I was like, oh, I can easily get this job, and they pay moving expenses. They're like, let's go to Hawaii. That was 1991. We thought we were only going to be here for 2 years. It's 23 years ago. Yeah, time flies. When you're having fun. I mean, but honestly, like most people that we know that came here with the intention, like, oh, I'm gonna move to Hawaii forever. Almost all, the vast majority of them were gone within like 18 months to a year. Hawaii is a very romantic place, like from the outside, people think, but it's a little difficult to live here. It's a high cost of living. Hawaii's the remotest place on the planet, more remote than outposts in Antarctica. It's like 2,500 miles to the nearest other living human beings that are not on a ship. Yeah, I mean it's hard to live. The jobs here are not that great. A lot of jobs, like most of the jobs, it's either like military, tourism, and healthcare. Hard to make a living here. So 2001, moved to Hawaii, but actually did manage to go to Burning Man with Dan. COD, Cult of Distraction, returned. We had about 20 campers. That was the first year we had our bar, although we didn't really do much with it besides just like make it and hang around it. But yeah, that was a good year. My brother Dan fell off an art car and got injured. Then afterwards we went home. Like he he actually went back to New Jersey to go hang, I guess, like recuperate because he had badly hurt his leg, and that was the beginning of September 2001. And then, almost, I guess, all of you know what happens next. September 11th, right? September 11th happens. He was actually there. Yeah, that was a crazy morning. Okay, so then let's see, 2002. Uh, I was hanging out here in Hawaii, and I was like, the feeling of just being here is very familiar. It's very similar. I was like, what is this? What is this like? And I was like, it felt very similar to like being out like on the playa, and I was just like, huh, and I remember like looking up, doing a little research, and I was like, oh, there's these like new like regional groups that are kind of popping up all over the place. And yeah, I mean, I know I had a couple of friends here, but I was like, I love Burning Man. I just moved here. I want to make some friends. It's like, I want to get together with the local Burning Man group. There wasn't any Burning Man group, and I was like, huh. I was like, well, I really want to hang out with other burners. Like, how do we do that? And so finally, did some research, looked online, and they're like, oh, you could become like a regional contact. And I was like, oh, and this has always been one of my philosophies. It's like, I just kind of want to do the fun thing that I want to do, but if no one else is doing it, it's like, well, I guess I have to do it, right? I mean, it's not that I want to do it. Like, if somebody else is willing to do it, then like, fine, you do it, and I'll help out, But I threw my hat into the ring. I think, God, who did I talk to? I think Andy Grace, Action Girl. Back then, she was in charge of the regionals. I think I talked to her, maybe a couple other people. And so I guess me and two other people threw their hats in the ring, and they were like going to do like interviews. And I don't know, a week or two later, they kind of get back to me, and they're like, well, you got the job. And I was like, oh, awesome. Thanks. Barely talked to me at all. And they're like, yeah, the other two people never got back to us. I was like, oh, okay. I guess it's me. So, so 2002 didn't actually go to Burning Man that year. But what we did instead was we had our inaugural burn. There's a beach on the west side of Oahu. Oh, I didn't really say that, like where I live. I actually live on the island of Oahu. I live in the North Shore, a place called Pupukea now. But yeah, originally I was the regional contact for all of Hawaii. But then as the story goes on, you'll hear about, other people became regional contacts for other islands. So this is 2002. We go out to this beach called Makua. Makua Valley is where like the army does like live fire training exercises, and then there's like a little 2-lane like highway, and then on the beach side there's like a beach and a bunch of like campsites, and it's unregulated, and it took us a couple of years to figure this out, but it's actually like illegal to camp there. But it's one of those things in Hawaii. It's like, ain't illegal till you get caught. It's like you're out in the country now, so it's like, yeah, people do what they want, and people have been camping out there for like many, many years. So, we showed up. There was probably about like 30-40 of us. We dug a pit, and we busted up some pallets, and we got some other like firewood, and we did a whole like beach cleanup, and don't worry, it's not like Burning Man 1996, like when we went and we. Oh, I didn't even tell you that part. Like when we left, we're like, our mooping of our camp consisted of like, well, look, what do you do when you finish camping? You kick the fire, like the dirt over the fire pit, right? And you just kind of bury it. And I was like, it's sticking up. It's like, just bury it, Yeah. So we didn't do that. Like our first burn, we had screens, we had magnets, we cleaned up like other burn pits. I mean, one of the best things was like when other people would, like local families would come around and be like, who are you guys? We're like, oh, we're like Burning Man, like a local group. It's like, well, what are you doing? Like, we're cleaning up the beach. And they're like, why? We're like, because that's just what we do. We leave no trace, we clean up, we make things better. And like, that was like our first taste of, interacting with like the local community, and people like just being impressed and being like, oh wow, like we really like the cut of these guys, Chip, like, and then they even told us, they're just like, you know what, when I come back here, I'm gonna come camp where you guys cleaned it up. It's like, yeah, thanks for making it better. So 2003, I think besides me, the first regional contact was my friend Jeff Hurl. He became, I think it was 2003, right? So our partner in crime with all this local Hawaii Burning Man stuff, regional activity. Uh, let's see. No, we didn't incorporate till a couple of years later, but yeah, I mean, from that point on, like we actually returned to Makua like about every 3-4 months, and we would do these like group camping trips, and we'd come up with these like silly names for them. Um, but it was always kind of like it would be like 30, then 40, then maybe 50 people. Like we didn't have like any generator. There's no electricity. We'd had like the kind of drums, and like a burn pit or whatever. And we would do lots of cleanups. Yeah, and then let's see. When we returned to Burning Man in 2003, with the Cult of Distraction again. My brother, we drove out there, and I think we had like a 14-foot truck at this point. Camped next to Spock Mountain Research. Those guys were a lot of fun. I remember later in the week they all put on diapers and drank a lot, and then proceeded to see if they could like actually use the diaper in the appropriate fashion, like go to the bathroom in them while they're wearing them. 2003 is also where I met a wonderful, wonderful friend, sister. She's like a sister to me, Jenny Kay. She camped across the street at Cypress Lounge Bingo. Lifelong friendship, still friends with her to this day. In fact, I'm going to be camping with her on the playa this year. My first time back in 13 years. I haven't been back since 2011. And, oh yeah, those were the very first year we did the Friday Sunset Luau. We did it at the Cult of Distraction. I believe we called it Kama'aina on the Playa. And I think there's maybe a couple of dozen like Hawaii people like showed up. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. 2004, Cult of Distraction and Cypress Lounge Bingo. We actually did a joint camp. It was kind of camp next to each other, but together. We all kind of front was kind of separate, but the back was all kind of the same. And an awesome year. That was also the first year that so the regional group that we created, that we started up, I gave it the name of Pilina. In Hawaiian, that means the connection. So yeah, that year we had there was the first year we had kind of like an unofficial. I don't think it was registered. It was an unofficial camp, what we call the Pilina camp. And we did our second Friday Sunset Luau. And then, another project in 2004 was the very first year of something, one of my projects I'm most proud of, a little thing called the Regional Information Center. It's basically Stephen Raspa. He did a yeoman's job helping me out. He got like DPW to build a structure. I organized like all of the regionals to make posters, so I think it was like 11 by 17 posters, and I got them to just, to write whatever they want. It was kind of like when you go to like a conference, people have like research projects or whatever. Like it's just like a simple way of kind of expressing like information, in just like a 2D visual format. We don't have to like, explain anything or show a video or anything. And yeah, I think we had a fairly good bit of participation. And then we had shifts where, different regional contacts can come and hang out. And so like anybody who wanted to stop by and like asking questions, there'd always be somebody there kind of like manning it, And then the other part of the Regional Information Center, or RIC, was meant to be like a hangout spot for regional contacts. Because up until that point, I mean, there's this regional discussion list, like an email group that was probably like our best method of communicating with each other, and it was quite lively at the time, and a lot of stuff was bandied about, a lot of debates going on. But outside of that, the only other times that we would kind of communicate or get together was like once a year on the playa. They did this like what now has become like the regional network like celebration. So we would get together in first camp, I think it was like a Wednesday or Thursday, and it'd be like a 1 or 2 hour just kind of drunken fest of people just kind of hanging out, like, oh my god, that's what you look like in real life, like. kind of thing. So yeah, so the idea of the Rick was a place where it's like, more than just a 1-2 hour little stretch where we all get drunk, and like, in like an actual in life place where we can kind of get together and you could talk to someone in real time and actually kind of get to know people. I mean, as time would go by, I think it was in 2006 they would start. There was like the first summit, and then which later on became like the global like leadership conference. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So yeah, 2005. That was this. Cult of Distraction didn't go. I think my brother took the year off. I just like flew into Reno, rented a car, and went. I think I brought like about like 100 lays or something. Yeah, so it was the second year for the Pilina camp. I had like 150 campers. That might have been like our biggest camp. Oh, no. I think 2006 was our biggest camp. So we did a third Friday Sunset Luau in 2005. Oh, yeah, we had our first roasted pig. So we had some friends. Was it Greg? I think it was. So as our friend Playa Pete and his friend Greg, who are now most known for the Monaco. I think Greg had this spit where you could put up to like 120-pound pig and coals underneath it, and it would just be like this electric motor would just slowly like rotate. And I mean, you'd be basting it and checking it out there just for like 9 hours in the hot sun, like this roasting thing. But when it was done, it was incredible. And then this 2005 was also the second year for the Rick, but it moved. So the first year the Rick was kind of like behind Center Camp. I'm trying to remember where it was, by like BMIR or something like that. So the 2005 actually moved into Center Camp. It was like right next to Media Mecca. And 2005, yeah, that was the Katrina year. That's right. Because I flew in to Reno, and I think I flew in like on a Wednesday, and I think Katrina had like just happened. And for all you young kids out there, back then that was still kind of the era when like cell phones didn't work and there was like no internet, and so it's really hard to get like real information like out on the playa. Okay, quick little side story. A couple years before that, I made an art installation at our camp, and I called it the Rumor Mill. Because, God, I don't know if it was like 97 or which year it was, but I remember people going around talking about, oh, Princess Diana died. Like, I mean, people would say all sorts of things, like, oh, this famous person, that famous person died, and you get out and like, no, they're not dead at all. But that year, it's like, oh, yeah, Princess Diana died, and then it turned out, oh, it was actually true. So I made this a bulletin board, and people can come, and I had like 12 different or 16 different categories, and basically it was called the Rumor Mill, and it said like, read a rumor, leave a rumor. And so people would kind of come up and just like write down, like in the realm of sports or politics or celebrities or science or whatever, science, like, oh, we've just aliens have contacted us just for the first time. I mean, how would you know? It's like you wouldn't. It was always kind of a game back then. You could make up anything and just be like, well, we're out here at Burning Man. We're away from the real world, or now we call it the default world. Yeah. So 2005, I'm working at the Regional Information Center next to Media Mecca and Center Camp, and Katrina happens, and so I get there a little later, because I was doing this like Wednesday to Sunday thing. Just like renting a car, driving out there, and I brought with me like some newspapers, and like I think Katrina had hit like the day before or something. So the Rick almost became this like de facto place where people, like a source of information, where like people would just kind of stop by and they'd like look at the newspapers and like look at the information and like, oh my god, what's going on? And then people would like want to like drop off like donations and stuff, and we're like, no, I think they wouldn't, like we had set up places like Playa Info or other places, like we'd kind of funnel people there, but people would always kind of come to us. Yeah, it was an interesting year. Okay, 2006. That was a momentous year for Capulina for me. Like a lot of different things. Capulina finally incorporates as a 501c3. right? And at that point in regional network history, I think there's only either one or possibly two other regionals that were actually 501c3s. I think most of the regionals use the same organizations type as the Burning Man project that time, which was an LLC. So everyone was forming an LLC, but like we're a for-profit company, but we're not into making profits, and so we were like, well, why not just be a nonprofit? Which Burning Man eventually did become in 2011. 2006 was also our very first multi-day burn. It's called Rebirth. Oh yeah, I'll have to say is my friend, a really good friend, John Corbin. He became a regional contact for the Big Island, or the island of Hawaii. I can't remember if it was 2004 or 2005. And so in 2006, he finally found us a place where we could do a proper like multi-day burn, and he found us this like old lava field. It was it was all grown over. It was like it was I think it was like a sugar cane plantation, but then it was like for like many years ago, so it was kind of rough. We had to bring in like a bulldozer. It's like I think it was like a D9 or something to kind of flatten it out and smooth it out. But yeah, we had, I'm trying to think, that first year like a good like 300 people or something. We had the full legit event. We had a gate, we had a ranger part-time, I think at least one ranger. I had our DPW headed by Eli. I forget his last name now. Eli, sorry, I forgot your last name. He still is out in the play. He's probably out there right now, like setting up stuff. We had medical, we had greeters, we had fire spinners, we had the whole show. My friend Mike Mong built our iconic like Phoenix. It's the same Phoenix that we had built for Core years later. We'll talk about later. Yeah, it was a very successful event. Even like the police, like we interfaced with like the police, firefighters, like everyone. We got all the insurance, like we dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. And one of our claims to fame was the story we heard years later was like the police would go to bust up like other parties. And this is in the Big Island in Puna. It's like the southeast side of the Big Island. And, the police would go to bust up these parties, and they would go to be telling these people, and they're like, hey, you guys should be doing it like these Burning Man people, because they're doing it right, okay? I think at that point, to the police, any event that had over 100 people is technically a riot. And so they came in, they saw us with like 300, and they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. But, they walked in, we showed them all around. They saw like the kids' camps, the older people, and everyone was just having a good time. And there's no fights and no injuries. And they're very impressed. Oh, 2006 is also the third year for the Pilina camp. That, I think, was like our high mark. The camp was so big, it basically kind of took up a block. It was a village. Cult of Distraction, Cypress Lounge, Bingo also came back, and we anchored like one corner. Playa Pete and Greg, they anchored like another corner, and Playa Pete made this out of scaffolding, like this really large like volcano. I don't know if it was like 50 feet tall or something. It was like huge. I mean, you could see it from across the playa. And then Mike Mong, who built our Phoenix, and he also has done other like playa art pieces. He anchored like a third corner. And I think we had our fourth sunset luau. I think we just had the one pig that year, but there was something like 750 people lined up. That pig was gone in like 15 minutes. If it wasn't for the tuna guys showing up, like, oh my God, there'd probably be like lots of people like angry. I was like, there's no food left over. I mean, it was always kind of a potluck. Like we asked people to kind of bring stuff, but of course there's more mouths than, people, having hands to bring food. That was the last year of the Cult of Distraction, sadly. Yeah, it was also the third year for the Regional Information Center, but yeah, now it moved more. It was like still in center camp, but it actually moved to like first camp, or like right next to first camp, and so it was just kind of looking out like right on the Esplanade, and it was kind of more of a proper kind of department then. It's like it wasn't just like this ramshackle like in the first year. It was just like construction scaffolding with like plywood like zip tied to it, and then I would just like staple these posters onto this warping plywood. I mean, this was finally they used some of that like filigreed wood that was like left over from like the David Best temples, and so we used that was like our signing, and then Stephen Raspa graciously got us like a bunch of couches and some like desks and things, and it was a great place, and we had a lot of shifts. Like I think we had at least two regional contacts on, and we think it was like 2 hour shifts or whatever. And so it was a great opportunity for regional contacts to just kind of get together and meet and talk about regional network stuff. All right, 2007, we had our second rebirth on the Big Island. I think we probably had somewhere around like 450 people or something. Again, very successful. Had a great time. The fourth year for the Pilina camp. That year it went down in size because 2006 was a high water mark. This year in 2007 was about 70 people. We had our fifth annual Friday Sunset Luau. The Rick came back again for the fourth year, in the same place in Center Camp. And then at the end of 2007, we actually held our first Capulina like year-end summit. So I kind of need to explain Capulina a little bit. Yeah, we had different regional contacts and different islands, but the whole concept of Capulina was that we were, as I said, Hawaii is the most remote place on the planet to be. So we need to rely on each other. And so I'd like work together and achieve like economies of scale and etc. So the whole idea of Capulina was that we were like one statewide family. I mean, each island was kind of running its own show, but then for larger projects, we would come together and like work together, and we would have like one 501c3, like it's like one bank account. It's like like this one main entity that would kind of umbrella and cover everything else. So each island can just focus on more of like the more fun things to do. Like DPW, it's fun. And art and rangers and all the other stuff. Just not getting bogged down with like insurance and permits and this and that. Yeah, so then that was the 2007. We were at the end of the year. We had our first year-end summit, which was a gathering of like all of the movers and the shakers on the different islands, and we got together and we went over like everything that happened that year, and we'd like set the budget for the next year, and it was a great time, and we all learned a lot. All right, 2008. 2008, very momentous year. The third rebirth, our biggest ever at that point. I think we had like 650 people. It was a smashing success. But actually, right before that, my son Luca was born. And as I like to say, my attempts at retiring began the moment my son was born. But they wouldn't let me. So the next couple of years I kind of hung on as leading Capulina and being the regional contact in here in Hawaii, but I kept trying to pass the reins because I was like, well, I think I got some other priorities and things I got to do. And my son was born with some medical difficulties that required a lot of time and attention and work. I mean, he's doing fine. He's doing great now. He's actually 16 and a half, just got his driver's permit. He's taking the SATs soon. Probably going to be like empty nest in a year and a half or so. But yeah, so 2008, son was born, last rebirth. Oh yeah, well later on we'd find out it was the last rebirth because the people that we rented the land from, we would find out that like, oh, the land's not permitted for this use, and you have to get a special use permit. And they had done all this other like illegal construction, and they had all manner of difficulties, so we couldn't go back there. At that point, we were just consistently looking around all over the state for like anywhere to do some type of event like this, and it's just really really difficult. Hawaii is not a large state. There's a few large landowners. It's like the state government, the federal government, like the military, the Kamehameha schools, Castle and Cook, Dole. I mean, they own like most of the land and most of the places. If you just like look around the plain, be like, oh, that'd be an awesome place to have a burn. And it's like, yeah, but unfortunately, it's owned by so and so, and they're not interested in renting out their land to us. So yeah, then that was the 5th year for the Pilina camp. And we didn't have a Friday sunset luau that year. And the 5th year for the Regional Information Center. The center camp is still in the same spot. 2009 comes around. And yeah, rebirth is no more. This is when things kind of start to turn. Like we're not really doing like the big burns anymore. Like we couldn't go back to Makua because a couple years before that, like we were doing these like 30, 40, 50, 60 person like just kind of unplugged beach burns, and they worked great. And then the dance community felt left out, and they said we want to be included. So we're like, okay, we're all into inclusion, so let's include you. And then, of course, they wanted to bring generators and lights, and we had an event, and it was about to happen, and I got a email from the Department of Land and Natural Resources telling me to cease and desist with this event because it now has peaked above the radar, and no more could we have our beach burns at Makua. Rebirth, we could not do rebirth at the same spot anymore. So at that point, we kind of pivoted to doing events we called urban events. Like we would rent out like a club or a bar, and some of them had like an outdoor space, and we'd have fire spinners. People do like suspensions. Like we had a whole range of things. We had bands. Yeah, so 2009. So starting off that it kind of started off with a bit of tragedy. Our really, really good friend, John Corbin, he, started off end of 2008. He had a little pain in his shoulder. And then within 6 months, he passed away. He had some kind of cancer that was never diagnosed. And so, yeah, that was a really big blow. Our friend Freddie took over, and later on, Steven helped Freddie. And they would continue to do other events, just like gatherings and get-togethers, and they would build floats for the Christmas parades and stuff, but we never really ever did another large burn. So 2009 was also the 6th and the last year for the Pilina camp. I think the last camp was actually down at 30 people. It was the 6th and last Friday sunset luau. And the 6th, and I believe this was the last year for the Rick in the center camp, near first camp. Because after, I think it was 2010 or 2011, the Regional Information Center got folded into Everywhere Village. So that was, Burning Man decided, it's like, well, why have Black Rock Arts Foundation and Burners Without Borders and Regional Information Center, like we're having like all of these different places, like we're all talking about the 51 weeks of the year, right? And so they wanted to have like one place where it's all kind of concentrated together. Yeah. That was 2010. I actually didn't go in 2010. And I remember I was sitting in my house and I was like watching the webcam and just like, reading stuff like friends would post, or send me. And that's when it first hit me. I sent out this email, just like, I think it was like 1 or 2 paragraphs. And it's basically just like, hey, what if we did this project where each regional, we get a bunch of different regionals, like to bring out to the playa the effigy that that we make in our regional, and then we'll put it like we'll surround the man with like these effigies, and the early beginning idea was that, like, oh, it was going to be this fantastical thing where, like, when this ring of like regional effigies light up, it's like that each one's gonna shoot towards the man, and then that's what'll light up the man. But of course, I mean, Crimson had other ideas. And I'm sure oh man, that's just a logistical nightmare that would have been. So yeah, I actually corralled people. Like, I sent out this email, like it got a lot of response. Again, it was on this regionals discussion list, right? And a lot of the regionals were like, yeah, let's do this. And then I think I approached the Burning Man project about this, and they weren't really that interested, because also this was just right after Burning Man happened. I'm sure they're still like, mooping the playa and like cleaning up. And I think they're like, we'll talk about this like later on, or it's like, if you can get this off the ground, then like, then maybe we'll talk about it. So then over the next month or two, I put together a spreadsheet, and it was somewhere in the vicinity, 24 different regionals had pledged to bring effigies, and we made it legit. I got them to commit, it's like with the size and the shape and how much money and like what they're going to do and who are they going to be the contacts and everything that. And then at a certain point, I fairly quickly on, I realized, it's like, oh, this is too big for me to do. Like, I can't do this. And so I approached, I was approached by my friend Curtis Coleman, who actually had a very similar idea. And I don't know if Curtis, if you thought I was stealing your idea or something, but I was actually more interested. I was like, hey, Curtis, can you take this over from me? Because like I'll do the Hawaii effigy, but I'm not gonna like organize this whole. This is too much for me to do, like all the way from Hawaii. And then later on, like Andy, Grace, and Burning Man, they get involved, and they say like, okay, this is awesome. We want, and so they took control of it, and I willingly gave it up, and said, and yeah, then they did an awesome job. And when Corey 2011 came around, that was actually my very last trip to the playa. I did go with my brother. We did make a little mini cult of distraction. We had our little bar top and our little cod flags, but yeah, my main focus that year was CORE, which CORE stands for Circle of Regional Effigies. That was one of the names I came up with when we were first like figuring this out, and I think I came up with like a dozen different things, and I was just like, I don't know, what do you want to call it? And everyone's like, CORE, yeah, we like that. I'm like, okay. Yeah, so 2011, CORE happens. It's amazing. It's my final swan song. I bow out, my last trip to the playa. And then 2012, I know I'm heading towards retirement. I'm like, okay, I think I got one last thing in me. And so we actually find our golden goose. We find this spot on Oahu that's willing to rent us out for a multi-day burn. And we're like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna like leave this to like the next generation, and I'm gonna have it all set up. And this event was supposed to be called Kaleidoscope, and it was great. And it was on this ranch, and it was secluded, and we had a ironclad contract with the owner and everything. Unfortunately, the property's owned by the Mormon Church, and the owner leased it or still does lease it from the Mormon Church, and it was like subleasing it to us. And so like in the contract, I mean, it says, it specifies that they're responsible for telling the landowner like this is what's going on. So about 24 hours before the gate is supposed to open, we were contacted by the Mormon Church telling us to cease and desist, and they said, if we let people on this property, I personally will be arrested. So Yeah, there was a lot of last minute scrambling. We had people flying in from all over the world. We managed at the last second to find another place, and Kaleidoscope actually did happen again for like the next year or two after that at this other place called Camp Timberline. Wasn't as optimal as this place, but it was a place and it did happen. That was 2012. So then, yeah, pretty much at that point, like right after the Kaleidoscope disaster, both me and Jeff, we both retired and hung up our hats, and we passed the torch. And our friend Mac Call, she became the regional contact for Oahu. And yeah, I just kind of moved on with my life. I mean, Burning Man kind of came back around again. Let's see, it was roughly like 2016 or so, like maybe another 4 years later, is like when my friend Clem, also known as Halon, he contacted me and was asking for advice and information about Pilina and like activities here, and that kind of began this discussion. I guess has been going on like 8 years now, where I've been trying to help him like get things going here again, because after Mac took over, she did it for a couple of years and then she moved to the mainland, and then I think a couple other people took it over after that, but then everything just kind of petered out and nothing much really happened anymore. So in my life, in between then, my son grew up, and I spent years, being a dad and going to work, and yeah. Uh, Other than that, experienced a whole hell of a lot of death. The first one was, I think it was 2013. My wife's younger sister tragically died. Uh, and at that point, I don't know, we decided we kind of needed to change. And so this house that we'd been living in, we'd sold it and we bought some land and we were going to build this house. And the rental market was really crazy. So there was only this one place that we could move into. And it turned out we moved in with this sociopath. And that was about 9 months of hell. But then we finally built the house and we moved in. Once we moved in, we were like, you know what? We're never moving again. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place. 2015, both of my wife's parents passed away. Not together, but they were separated for many years, but they both passed away within a couple of months each other. 2016, I get in a head-on collision. Don't worry, I'm okay. I have a scar on my shoulder I could show you. Let's see, 2018, my father passes away. 2022, my wife's stepdad passes away. Yeah, there also were like a couple of other cats that we had that died. And also there's just the job I have every day, where it's just like my job basically is death, like I'm just looking for cancer, and it's not uncommon to see body parts on a daily basis. And then last year, my wife's older brother, passes away. Yeah, so time moves on. So then finally last year, in terms of the Burning Man world, our Burning Man resume, we finally got together. We got the gang back together. We did a Hawaii leadership summit on the Big Island. Yeah, because we've been kind of referring to ourselves as a zombie regional. And apparently we're not the only ones. I guess there are some other regionals out there like this too, where we used to be quite active. We used to have a lot of stuff going on, but now seemingly nothing. But, it's still kind of there in name only, but what is really going on? So we did a summit to kind of to get together people from the different islands. We had people from Oahu, the Big Island, Maui, Kauai, and and we had a good about 24 hours together, and we decided, let's keep this conversation going and let's see where this goes. And we created a Slack group, And I mean, not much has happened like since then, but this year we're actually going to be doing our first ever Friday sunset luau on the playa after 15 years. Finally, is going to be coming back. If anybody wants to come by and say hi, if you're going to hear this before then, it's going to be at Star Cats. It's at 3:30 in Esplanade, Friday from 7 to 9. Bring something to share. I'm going to bring a half gallon of Pog. Yeah, so then brings us to this year. So the return of the Friday Sunset Luau. My return to the playa after 13 years. I'm going to feel like, anybody know who Rip Van Winkle is? You know, I go to sleep and I wake up 13 years later. Last time I went was 2011. Now it's 2024. A lot of things change. I don't know. Maybe things are kind of returning the way they were. Tickets are still available. It's like the gate opens in like in about a week. It's gonna be interesting. And 2024 is also now listening to this, the birth of the Shadow of the Man. This is a project I've been working on, at least in my head now, for I don't know, last couple of years, listening to other podcasts. You know, figuring out what I want to do in the world, like how can I contribute, and I figured this is the best way. You know, do what I love, talking to people. I'm very interested in stories of other people. You know, like whether if it's like Marion, you're CEO of Burning Man, or Action Girl. You know, you've done so much. You know, the Coyote. You know, like I love your book. I read it. Like it's like I want to know like more of the people's background stories. You know, it's like where'd you come from? It's like and then but also just like how did this change you? Like what does this mean to you? You know, like I want more from the story, and I thought this would be kind of an interesting thing that other people might be interested in. So yeah, that finally brings me to the third part of our show. How has Burning Man changed me? Well, Burning Man, it's always been about one thing. And it's something Burning Man has taught me the value of something what I call the connection. I mean, that's what I named Pilina. Like, that's what it's all about. It all started with me and my brother. You know, it's like we're finally adults. We're not kids anymore, and we're living on the other side of the country. And we're like, let's go do something fun. It was about like it was a bonding experience. And then when we created the Cult of Distraction, you know, it was a bonding experience. It was people connecting. And then when I created the regional cure, it was about connecting. Like I wanted to connect to other people. And we did these multi-day events. We did these urban events. We did these playa luau's. Like it was all about connecting people. It wasn't, I want to throw this big, huge, crazy party and I want everyone to know that, like, I'm the man throwing this party. It's like, no, I don't care. Like I just, again, I want the thing to happen. If somebody else would do it, then fine. But nobody else does do it. And it's all about people connecting, Yeah, going back to the playa has also taught me the value of like breaking down barriers and connecting with strangers. I mean, Burning Man's always been about like you like what Danger Ranger did years ago. You drew a line in the desert, you crossed it, and you walk in this new place, and it's you're somebody new. You're the wobbling crank. You're not Joe Smith. It's like who you are in the real life. I mean, one of the worst things, the questions I remember asking people, I'd be like, so what do you do in the real world? They would just recoil, be like, ugh, I don't want to talk about my programming job back in San Francisco. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a place where you just kind of break down those barriers and just connecting with people. Like, just why have these artificial barriers, whether it's like race or class or gender or anything? Like people are just people, treating everyone as equals, or as more as equals, as family. Yeah, and also the whole part of going through adversity and struggle, kind of like the military or fraternity or whatever. And it's like, it's like you're being there for each other. I mean, it creates community. Yeah, and I took that lesson back home and tried to replicate it in my own life and community. Yeah. There was someone asked a question of Marion. She had a talk at Robot Heart a little while ago, and someone asked her. She was like a woman of color, and she asked her like, "Oh, how can I get into Burning Man? It seems like it's a white space." And Marion gave a really great answer, and she brought up like the Black Burner Project and this and that, but I don't know. In my mind, this is I wrote what I was like. This is kind of what I would say to that. It's like, how can I get into this white space? It says the connection between burners as fostered on the playa is way stronger and deeper than skin deep. The playa is actually a lot more diverse than the casual glance will tell you. You're welcome to join the family. We invite you with open arms. We'll accept you with no preconditions if you'll accept us with none. Again, it's the connection. This is what Burning Man has taught me. Yeah, this concept, and later on I would call it the connection hypothesis. It's radically rearranged, just about everything in my life. It's maybe a better husband, a better father, a better coworker. Just a better random stranger on the sidewalk. It's one of my favorite games is what I call like giving a gifting strangers with connection. It's like I'm at a red light, walking across the street, and it's pouring rain. I have an umbrella, and I see somebody there, and they're just kind of sheepishly just standing in the rain. I just walk over to them and put the umbrella over them. I'm like, here, have some umbrella. And every single time they're just like, oh, are you sure? I'm just like, yeah. Because you know what? Like that's to my mind, it's like that's the Burning Man way. Like it doesn't matter who you are. It's like I'm doing something. Like I have something I can help you with. It's a gift for me to connect with you and share. Yeah, and let's see, death and the connection. Yeah, like I said, I've been through a lot of death, but I've learned a lot from it. I actually have on Substack. I'll give you the URL in a second. I've been like writing down some of these things about this connection hypothesis, but one of them is about death. Because the thing that I've kind of learned after going through so much, so close. I didn't tell you like even the worst of it. I won't go there. When somebody dies, that connection that you have with them is just like ripped out of you. There's just this hole. It just leaves this gaping hole. The closer you are to somebody, like the more of a hole, like it rips out of you. And so, what do you do? What do you need? After that, it's kind of like you make a hole in the ocean. It's just like, well, the water rushes in to fill it. It's like, well, what rushes in to fill it? Other connection. It's one of the worst things you can do, or that can have happened to you. It's like when somebody dies, and I've seen this firsthand in families. Some family I'm connected to. The worst thing in the world you could do is like when somebody passes away is for everyone to go to each other's throats. It's just like you just make that hole wider. The thing to do when death happens is for people to circle the wagons, and you need people to put their hand on your shoulder and say, you know what? I might not be able to do much for you, but at least it's like, look, I'm here for you. Anything that you need, I'm here for you. It's just that bond. It's that connection that can help heal. That can help heal the wounds. Like death is not about the dead. It's about the living. The dead are dead. They can't, feel disconnected anymore, as far as we know. But the people who are here, your sisters, your brothers, your mothers, your aunts, uncles, fathers, like friends, family, like that's what we need. Is you need connection, and that to me is what Burning Man delivers. So yeah, I started a Substack. It's dedicated to my understanding of what the playa inspired me to understand as the connection hypothesis. You can find it at one word, connectionhypothesis.substack.com. Yeah, check it out. Subscribe if you're interested. Right now at this point, most of the concept is in my head. I promise to write down more of it as time goes by. Honestly, I'll be more motivated if anyone's actually interested, meaning if people actually subscribe. So don't worry. The more you subscribe, the more stuff I'll write. Anyway, This has gone on. I've probably about an hour and 18 minutes so far. All right, well, that's my story. At least a taste of it. There's a lot more, you know. I'm sure as this series or this show goes on, you'll find out little bits more about me here and there. But honestly, each show is about the guest. It's not about me. Again, it's not the Andi show. It's the shadow of the man. You know, it's like I want to see like what effect has Burning Man had on people. Everybody says Burning Man changed me. You know, it's like, oh, Burning Man's this cathartic, this thing. It's like, oh, it's so transformative, blah, 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 blah. You know, like, well, what does that actually mean, you know, over time? I mean, and I'm not looking for something that's just like 100% like, oh, I'm just looking for good stories. It could be anything, you know? I've heard bad stories too. Alcoholism, drug abuse, you know, like... Burning Man is a very transformative, very wonderful thing. It's profound effect, and has shaped people's lives and has changed things and communities. And I can't wait to explore more of that with all of you. And with that, I thank you. And our next episode is going to be with our first interview subject, and that's going to be George Papp. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, rate, and review it. Tell a friend, and help to spread the word. The more engagement we get, the more likely this project will grow. If there's enough support, perhaps we can do a lot more of these interviews and publish more shows per month. You can also follow Shadow of the Man on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. The links for these pages are all available on the front page of shadowoftheman.com. See you next month for a new episode of The Shadow of the Man.
Thank you for listening to this latest show. We have to make another one, so gotta go. Don't worry, for next month we already have one in the can. Very soon you'll be listening to a new Shadow of the Man.